G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Sarah Spence from Content Rebels, based just north of Sydney here in Australia. Thanks for your time today, Sarah. Very welcome. Glad to be here. Let's start with how we know each other. Anita from Bespoke, who's based down here in Hobart, where I am as well. Heard you on another podcast and thought you'd be a great guest for us, so put us both in touch.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, I don't know Anita personally, but I'm very grateful to her to referring me to you.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Sure. So yeah, we're Content Rebels. We are a content marketing agency and we create content for brands to help them connect with their audience and basically either sell shit or, breed loyalty with their clients and their customers across a full range of B2C, B2B, big brands to small, kind of everything in between.
And content marketing is still very relevant these days. I was skeptical a couple of years ago when I started ramping up a bit more of my marketing knowledge and doing it more of it in a corner or two of some of my businesses, but still very, very relevant and working, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I ascribe to the perspective, I guess, that all marketing is technically content marketing because you cannot market something without words or visual or video. So it's it all comes back to content at the end of the day. But yeah, it has an incredibly persuasive and growth focus as well, and it can achieve some pretty incredible results.
And how did you start out?
Yeah, so I started out a long time ago now. I headed out of school and straight into uni doing a Bachelor of Arts in Public Communication. So I double majored in advertising and PR, but found it actually incredibly boring and started working full-time and studying full-time. So my first gig was as a receptionist in a loyalty marketing agency. And then I've kind of gone on to do everything, every kind of marketing and account management and relationship management, PR, guest relations at a 5-star hotel at one point. I've freelanced and then had some pretty big kind of corporate senior marketing roles. And that's where I was. That's in the UK and here back in Australia too. And then when my husband and I fell pregnant with our first, I was at Citibank in a senior marketing role there, and was pretty determined not to have to come back to that kind of corporate culture environment, particularly as a new parent. And so I started freelancing, and that was back in 2014. Started freelancing, and pretty quickly things grew to the point where I needed to use some subcontractors, and I started kind of playing around with a few different models of how to make it all work. And then in 2016, it's 2016, it grew to the point where I became completely overwhelmed, and I'd won a couple of big contracts with clients like Sheridan and Lend-Lease. I can't think who else, but a lot of big clients, and I just became completely overwhelmed. I ended up, we fell pregnant with our second, and I basically shut the whole business down. And Kate Toon, who's well known in the copywriting and SEO circles, and a small business.
I've had Kate a couple of years ago, actually.
Oh, there you go. Yes, she is great.
Yeah,
she is hilarious. Yes, she's a good friend of mine as well, which is lovely. And she said to me that the world will wait, and that I should go and do the baby thing. And she gave me that advice because I was really conflicted and worried that a lot of the growth I'd kind of led was going to fall away. So I, closed the whole thing down and then reopened it after I'd had some parental leave. And that was at the end of 2018. And really it has just flown since then. And we've just had growth after growth after growth until this year, which we'll talk about soon, I'm sure. But that's really where it all started, from freelancing as a copywriter through to now offering a whole range of content marketing services. So there's still that kind of core of content of copywriting there, but of course all the strategy side of things that goes with it, as well as video, graphic design. We're getting into podcasting and offering that as a service to our clients and things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Out of interest, Australia's the highest listeners to podcasts in the world per capita. So 40% of people over the age of 13 listen to at least one episode a week, and 10% of people listen to 6 or 7 episodes a week. And consumption of information of podcasts is 6 times that of audiobooks. So podcasting is huge at the moment.
It is indeed, and it's just such a good flex for so many brands. It's a relatively low cost, but high time commitment, but low cost content channel. But it's just such a great way to really showcase all of those awesome parts of your brand that you just can't fit into a website page or a series of blog articles, or even really kind of flex and showcase on social media.
Yep. And so would you say you started the business in 2014, or really it was 2018?
Yeah, so I don't know. People often ask me if I have like a business birthday, and I don't. It's a bit like, when you're in a relationship, it's like, do you choose the first day you met, or the first time you had your first date, or your wedding anniversary, or whatever? I don't know really. So yeah, it officially started in 2014, but 2018 was really where I said, okay, I feel like this could potentially have legs. Let's see how we could give it a go.
Yep. Okay, so let's say it was 2014. So how old were you then?
That's a good question. I was 30.
Yep.
Yes, 30.
Great. Mm-hmm. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over the last 10 years?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for the first probably 5 years, it was growing steadily to the point where I could kind of take the same kind of income as I had in a corporate world. So it wasn't doing anything gangbusters, but it was definitely heading in a good direction. But from 2018 onwards, we had, it was 89%, then 100%, then 190%, and then 110% year-on-year growth.
Wow.
Yeah. This year, it's not been quite on that trajectory, but also I'm quite glad it hasn't been, because as you can imagine, trying to manage that well and keep your sanity intact is kind of hard.
What would you put the downturn in growth this year down to?
Yeah, economic factors, absolutely. A lot of the clients that we work with have been directly affected. We have access to all their Google Analytics. We can see the drop in revenue. And of course, also, I think there's been quite a significant shift in the perception of the value of content this year, thanks to ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. I don't think it's a permanent change in the value that brands and businesses place on content. But I think it was very much a, whoa, okay, we've kind of got to wait and see. So there's still lots of good love out there for it, and there's an appreciation of great content, but there's been a shift in the value that particularly big brands put on it.
Yeah. I was going to ask about AI. I read that Bill Gates said a few months ago, it's pretty much going to settle down for the next 3 years. Not much is going to change, but then that's when it's really going to pick up. But obviously there was a lot of hype around it. People got excited. I think the dust is still settling at the moment, but both from an SEO point of view, but also reader engagement, you still need the humans to be, editing at the very least, if it's a base content off AI, is my understanding.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Yep, there's an awful lot that generative AI can do for us, but it can't bring that human touch to it.
How many full-time equivalent team members did you start with? I assume it was just yourself, and how many are you at now?
Sure. So yeah, it was just me for a long time, and then a bunch of subcontractors. I hired my first FTE at the end of 2020. By the start of 2023, we were at 20 FTE, and we've come right back now to just 9.
Yep. Wow, that is amazing growth. Yeah.
Yeah, it was big. And that was at the start of this year was a moment where I really do feel like I had succeeded, primarily because I got an awful lot of external validation, comments, PR interest, etc., particularly around that vanity metric of, wow, you went from just you to 20 people inside 2 years. Talk to us about how that happened. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it definitely went to my head a bit, because I was like, oh, okay, so this is what matters. That's interesting. Okay, I'll double down on that. But it's ultimately, of course, I think any business owner would know that it is not the only thing, and it is not something you should hang your hat on.
No, absolutely not. So that answers when the moment you felt like you had succeeded. What does success look like to you?
That has changed a lot over the years, I think. But success looks like to me, particularly now, it looks like building a really resilient business and holding firm to the growth that we have achieved. I think it also has to look like better balance and better mental health for myself, and being able to ensure that I can give my team everything that we've kind of promised in terms of a culture and a way of working that hasn't necessarily been available to us, but particularly over the last 6 months, because it has just been a bit of all hands on deck. Let's just hang on for dear life and get through this period. So success now very much looks like solidifying that and building something that's really resilient.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Oh, strategy. Just bringing it back to having a strategy. I'm sure I'm not alone in receiving about 50,000 spam emails every day offering me, 20 new prospects every month and, hey, grow your Instagram and whatever else. There are so many channels. There is so much opportunity to market your business. You can spend an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money and be awfully distracted if you don't have a strategy. So bringing it right back to that, who is your audience? Where are they spending their time? And what is going to be the one or two things that is ultimately going to get you that connection with them?
Yep. That's one of my favorite quotes. Sun Tzu, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat.
That's a great quote.
It's about 2,000 years old, still very
relevant. Totally.
And how did you fund your business?
It's just been bootstrapped by clients along the way. Haven't really had to put too much of our own capital into it, and just attempted to hold on to the coattails of the cash flow as we go.
It's one of the benefits of a mainly service-based business. Obviously, not that much capital needed.
Indeed.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Oh, such a good question. Yes, but I would pursue with more vigor than I have the time or energy for right now, a MarTech product that I've scoped and put a bit of R&D into, but I think I take everything I've learned so far and I would turn it into an awesome product.
Yeah, MarTech as in marketing technology, like a SaaS
product. Correct. Yes, a SaaS product. Yes, indeed.
Great. Me too. I wish I'd done SaaS 20 years ago.
Yes, I think we all do.
2020 vision in hindsight.
Yes.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Absolutely. I think this would be a very shared experience for so many of us, but it's all around the cash flow. The most stressful point for me was definitely in September and October of this year. Whilst all the growth was stressful, it was an exciting kind of stress. But at September and October this year, there was a whole confluence of things that happened. We had two of our most significant clients have to immediately pull budget because of cash flow issues they were facing. And at the same time, we found out that the virtual CFO and accountancy firm we'd been working with for about 10 months at that point had given us a whole series of really terrible advice. I'd been paying them a lot of money to advise us every month and to really own and run the numbers. And ultimately, when you're in small business, if you're not the one who's looking at your numbers every day, then of course there's risk there. And unfortunately, that's what happened. It completely screwed us over. It meant we had to reduce our FTE, which was incredibly upsetting for me. And I had to really find the energy and find the confidence, which was hard to come by at times, but to try and turn things around. So that was definitely the most stressful point. So do not lose sight of the numbers. Do not ever trust the numbers to anyone else. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, well, I'm a big numbers person. So Is that more the data was inaccurate, or the forecasting wasn't going out far enough?
So interestingly, they a bit of both. They ended up making our books really quite complicated. So there's a whole bunch of manual journals, and numbers are not my thing. Words are, but making the numbers get complicated to the point where I then felt completely out of my depth. And so I just kind of not stopped looking at them. Obviously, we're looking at them together with them every week, every month, but it was a much more look back view. And I was saying, as early as January this year, I was saying to, or January in 2023, I was saying to this team, I have a feeling there's something in my gut telling me that there's trouble on the horizon. And at every single meeting when I raised that, they were very confidently coming back to me and saying, but no, look at this and look at this, and this is what's coming in next month, and it's all good. But they just weren't forecasting correctly, or as far in advance as was really needed.
Yep.
And then I did take a break from the business this year to go back to the UK for a family holiday. My husband's Scottish, and they provided some pretty terrible advice to my COO whilst I was away as well, which really didn't help the cash flow at the time. So we've landed ourselves with quite a sizable bit of ATO debt, and then some cash flow issues, but we've worked through them now, and we're back onto a good wicket. But
it's so important. In 24 years in business, I've had over 30 business partners, 15 businesses in 3 countries. And in all that, I've worked with a shit ton of professionals in legal and accounting, and it's really hard to find good ones. When you do find them, obviously hug them and never let them go.
Yes.
But it's, even to this day with new businesses that I get involved with or help out, it's one of the first things I test to see if the professionals advising the founder or founders are competent or not dickheads. It's so important, especially if numbers aren't in your management team or leadership team, or for the founders, numbers aren't a strength. So it's even more important.
Absolutely. And I totally, put my hand up in the whole process that they had really good marketing. They marketed themselves as, advisory service for fast growing digital agencies. And that was exactly what we were. And their marketing and their onboarding process really, it was flawless. And so they totally, bought my trust. And that then, even when I was starting to feel like things weren't so good, or we were potentially at risk, and I was raising that, them saying to me, no, you're okay. And also a bit of the sunk cost bias of, I was paying them $5,500 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. And that sunk cost bias of going, okay, well, hang on, no, look, I'm trusting them. They're the professionals. They've told me they've got this in hand. So therefore I'm going to trust that they've got it. And it's been a really, it's been a big year for me in terms of having to kind of figure out whether or not I can actually trust humans. And I don't want to lose that, because it's a big part of who I am.
Narrow it down to accountants or financial advisors.
Yeah. Oh, we've had some doozies in other areas too, but yeah.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Is myself an answer?
Yeah, yep, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of experience in doing what it is that we do as a business. I'd had a little, but not a lot of experience in being a business owner. And I did realize, I think part of our early success was, or the kind of, the 2018-ish success, and then the 2020 and beyond success was really down to the fact that I fell in love with the role of being a business owner and the actual running of a business. But after realizing pretty quickly that ultimately it didn't matter how much I actually loved doing what I do, what I had to love was being a business owner, and that was a job in and of itself that set me on a path to going, okay, I really need to work on myself in this area, and being a leader and trying to be a good founder, not a founder that's always in everybody's business, in the business, and, you know, stepping on toes everywhere I go, which is very hard for me.
Yeah.
But I've worked really hard on that.
Have you read Michael Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited?
No, I haven't read that one.
Oh, it's my favorite book and the one that I recommend anyone read if they're thinking of starting, let alone growing a business. So I think you'll find that quite enlightening. I'll send it through to you after this, but he talks, one of the key concepts he talks in there, as I'm juggling this puppy and typing, is there's three main roles in a business: the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. And technical people can find it hard to, also often don't even recognize those other two roles, let alone develop themselves on those levels to make sure, you know, they provide the best they can to their team and the business.
Yeah, I guess that's really the transition I've gone through, is technical quite quickly into manager, and then I think somewhat annoyingly for the team sometimes now I'm in that entrepreneur zone, but it's you know, I get the big ideas. They call me the glitter bomb fairy. Like, I'll come in and be like, oh, let's do it this way. And then thankfully I've got a fantastic 2IC who's very good at taking my glitter bombs and putting them into jars so they actually make sense for the team.
And that's a very good way of putting it, glitter bombs. I've heard of another saying called, have you heard of seagull management?
Yes.
Fly in, shit all over the place, fly out again. Everyone just is confused, looks around at each other. What the fuck are we meant to be actually focusing on now? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's still definitely a potential issue, but I also know that whether it's glitter bombs or seagulls, this business it won't innovate, it won't be resilient, it won't be a long-term business unless there is somebody, and that's naturally where I land, who's looking forward and innovating in that space.
Yep. What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
That's another good question. I think I've enjoyed least having to learn about who are the right people, the people who would best suit this kind of working environment. Having to learn that on the go has been hard, because we've had people come into the business and then they really haven't suited this. We were a fully remote team, fairly autonomous, a lot of asynchronous work, and some people really suit that and some people really don't. And I wish I'd been able to learn all of that stuff without having to do it quite in such a high pressure, high growth environment.
Yep. What do you love most about growing a small business?
It's still got to be whenever a contract gets signed, there's still that buzz, you know, from way back in the original days of freelancing, when a client says, yes, great, we'd love to work with you. It still gives me a buzz every time.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
That we're not, or that thinking like a small business or thinking that you are a small business isn't helpful. You've got to think like you are a long-term, established, resilient business, because I think thinking of yourself as small, even if by definition, you know, ATO, whoever else wants to call you a small business, for me, thinking of myself and this business as small isn't helpful, because then it just feeds into that whole imposter syndrome of, oh, someone's going to find me out. Someone's going to find out that you know, that all of that work that we've done, that there's something fundamentally wrong with it. And, you know, even though I know there's nothing like that, but I'd say that's it. I really have tried to steer away from really seeing us as a small business and instead just seeing us as a good, strong, resilient business.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Definitely mental health. Whatever you can do to figure out what it is that you need as an individual in order to run the marathon. I think when you're experiencing periods of growth, it feels very much like a sprint, and you need to be there and leading it with that sprint energy, but ultimately it's actually not a sprint, it is a marathon. So whatever you need to do in order to maintain your mental health and physical health is so important.
Yeah, totally agree. Are you struggling to find time to work on your business, or is your health and relationships out of balance? Lost confidence, or are your weeks filled with fear? Our free 10-day Transform Your Performance online course shows you how to unlock at least 5 hours a week. We start with the secret to guaranteed success, and with over 100 lessons and free tools, you will become more focused, productive, and feel more in control of your business, health, and relationships. GrowSmallBusiness.com. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yes. So we've added people through, originally it was through basically people we'd worked with as subcontractors who ended up kind of in a really loving way, weaseling their way into the business in a way that we absolutely love. We have many people who started off as subcontractors, either like my 2IC now, who is our COO, who runs the entire business basically. She started out as a virtual assistant for me, doing 5 hours a week of trying to manage my emails.
Wow.
And she has grown and she has invested in herself and she has set goals for herself. And it has been the most beautiful thing to watch with someone who, unfortunately, prior to us coming together, she was kind of told from multiple different employers that, she'd only be ever worth this much, or, that's the most that she could ever want for herself. And all it really took was me saying to her, no, if you want it, go get it. And boy, has she done that. We've got other people in the team who were writers for us who have now come on and, worked their way up to being creative director and content managers and all sorts of roles. But the mistakes definitely, as I touched on before, have been adding people to a team culture where, even though we've always been very open and honest in interviews about how it's still a young business and we're pretty scrappy and, there's not everything is figured out. I haven't easily been able to identify during the recruitment process the types of people who would be well suited to that and those who aren't. And that has led to a lot of heartache and a lot of issues. And then also just the trying to really figure out and trying to help people to understand about themselves whether or not they would suit this kind of working environment, the remote working asynchronous type of environment. For some people that works really, really well. For others, they love the idea of it, but the practical nature of actually doing it means that they find themselves to be feeling incredibly lonely, or they, it's very easy to withdraw and to then feel like you don't have a team around you, even though you do. So there's a lot of need for active cultural input and discussion and dialogue, which some people think that they can do and that they want to do, but in practical terms, they find it very hard. So yeah, as I said before, I think I would have loved to have been able to learn all of that stuff without the high pressure growth situation. But also I probably wouldn't have learned so many of those things unless it was in that environment.
Yep. Yeah, we last year, 2023, we launched our 2-week short course called the Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit for that exact reason, because we think small business owners rush recruitment. They don't swat up on it, learn enough about it. We've pulled together, recommend the 5 best books around this. And because if you let B or C players on the bus, or assholes, toxic people, then as you well know, it just undermines everything. A players start leaving.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had, I love that ideal team culture. Ideal team player matrix, and that kind of mix of someone who's smart, hungry, and humble. And we had somebody join the team who, it was way down the track then that I realized that they were very much that smart and hungry, but hungry for themselves, not for the collective. And they were that skillful politician. And I won't go into detail, but it was an absolute mess that ended in dismissal and then cease and desist letters. And still, I believe for some people in the team to this day, continued comments and messages and all sorts of things. And it's just like, it really affected everything.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Asking your team, asking your people what it is they want, what they value, and trying to lead by consensus in that space. We don't talk about, when we are recruiting, we don't talk just about culture fit. We put a lot more and ask specific questions around culture add. What do you like? You know, as if we're recruiting and interviewing someone, what is it that you like about your work environment? What do you want for your work environment, and what can you bring to add to ours? We're still a really young, you know, and ever changing really culture, so it has to be driven by those people who are part of it, not by you know, one person. In saying that, there's some pretty clear lines that I don't ever want to cross around things like flexibility and psychological safeness, because I've worked in many a culture that just was not safe for me, and I have a neurodivergent brain, and I recognize now and understand so much more about myself and what I need, and I don't ever want to have a culture where people don't feel safe, so and don't have the flexibility that life needs. And with that comes the trust, obviously. Like, yes, if you need to go to a psychology appointment, or you need to go get your hair done, or go to school assembly or something, we trust our people enough that they will get the work that they need to get done around that, or at least they will advocate for themselves in saying, actually, I'm not going to make that happen. I need to take some leave, or I need to catch it up at another time, or I need to talk to the client about moving that deadline. So yeah.
Yeah, it's probably, it's not relevant for you because you've always been remote, but it's something that's just amazes me at the moment. All these big corporates in particular trying to push people back into the office because if they can't see them, they're not doing work. It's just, yeah, a bunch of bullshit. I believe if you haven't built the culture, got the right people on the team, obviously, but got that culture and a base or foundation of trust, then, you know, it's just such an inefficient way to manage people or work with people.
That's it. But I worry for the younger generation, though, who haven't had that in-office working environment. And I mean, there are just fundamentally, at any age, some people who will take advantage of that. But I try and make it that it's that of course is the 1% who are going to do that. And I try to trust everybody else.
Yeah.
And of course, then hire the right people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Oh, I haven't. I have two young children. I sent myself into a period of having pretty much every weekend getting migraines last year. And yeah, it's been tough. My husband and I now balance life admin and kid movements and all of that stuff a lot better than we used to, which is really helpful. And then I'm also now non-negotiable. I get up, I meditate, even if it's just for 10 minutes. Most of the time, it's not a very effective meditation, but I spend that time doing that. And then I take the dog for a walk. And so at least I've had my exercise for the day. But I don't, like, I have plenty of hobbies, but I don't currently spend the time doing them. My hobbies, as sad as it sounds, but are work and my kids. Yep. And so they're my priorities at the moment.
And how much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Yeah, a lot. I try really hard not to be the kind of leader who reads a new book every week and comes in with a new idea and a new way of doing something every week. But in saying that, I find self-development and professional development much more validating than it is necessarily like growing into new areas. I have a lot of imposter syndrome, and I struggle to feel confident in myself and my abilities so often. Then when I am listening to professional development podcasts or reading books, etc., often I'm like, oh yeah, but I already do that. Okay, yeah, and I do that, but perhaps not as much as I'd like. And none of it ever feels completely like it's brand new information, which I personally find really validating. I also work with a fantastic leadership coach who I absolutely love, who has helped mostly focus for me on how to get out of my own way, which is really where it's at. I'd love to be doing more, but I have not had the time the last 6 months. And that has really impacted my confidence and my mental health. Like, I realize now just how important it is to continue that journey.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
Yes, I have. I have a friend of mine who runs a really successful consultancy in Canberra, and he's gone off on a massively huge trajectory that I'm not planning to follow on, but he was kind of about 3 years further down the track than me when I was starting. And especially in the early days, just the time he would give me as he was driving to work on the phone was invaluable. Again, it was all about helping with my mindset and helping me to get out of my own way. And like, one of the best quotes he ever said to me was, the biggest thing that you can do to really push yourself forward is get comfortable with the chaos. And I held on to that a lot in those early years because it all felt completely chaotic, and that helped me a lot. And then yes, I also have this leadership coach I've been working with for the last few years who's just wonderful.
Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
No, not officially. I would like to look at that. I definitely feel like I've hit my ceiling in terms of where I can take this business just on my own. Although my husband is partially an advisor to me, but no, I don't have anyone official at the moment.
All right, Sarah, one of our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Holding on to your sanity in the process. Yeah, I think every actual business challenge, like, oh, how are we going to resource that work? How should we set up the bank account so that we've always got enough money for the ATO? How am I going to sell this to that client? How are we going to package our services? All of that stuff feels very, not easy, but simple to me. It feels very logical. There's a challenge. I need to sit there and think of a solution and then move forward and make that decision. That stuff comes more easily to me than holding on to my mental health in the whole process.
Yep. Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
I don't like him as a presenter per se, although he does address that in this book, interestingly. But 12 and a Half by Gary Vee, I found to be quite transformational for me. And I just loved the way he presented the kind of 12 and a half different emotions or feelings that you need to be at least aware of in order to be a successful business owner. I loved that one.
I haven't heard of that book. I actually haven't read any of Gary Vee's stuff. Also, not a big fan of his presentation or the big hustle mentality that he was pushing years ago. I don't know if he softened on that, but yeah.
He addresses that at the start of the book and actually talks about how the channels that he has ended up becoming most synonymous on, being short form video and Twitter and all short form content. He said there is no way to actually fully convey a sentiment in 140 characters or in 20 seconds. And so the snippets present him in this particular light, but that's actually not who he is. That's not really what he wants to be seen as or in the world. It's actually a strong recommend. It's a really easy read, and it's even if you put aside the fact that it's Gary Vee, it's still an awesome book to read.
Yeah, I'm adding that one to my list right now. Thank you.
Good.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Yes. Any of the Future Women podcasts are great, particularly the CEO Leadership series. I think that's just fantastic. And the whole team at Future Women do a wonderful job of putting together really great resources for professional development, particularly for women, of course, but anyone from CEOs and senior leaders through middle management, through people. They've got a great program for people who are getting back into the workforce after extended leave. And I think they're all pretty awesome.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
On a really basic level, I'd actually say Google Analytics, because if you don't know what's happening, if your website is your primary source of business, if you aren't looking at and don't know what's happening and where your audience are coming from, and you're not learning from that data, then it's a bit of a blind spot.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 10 years ago?
Even though this is going to be hard, it's going to be so worth it.
Great. Thank you very much for your time today, Sarah. Really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations on the growth. I know there's been quite a few ups and downs over the last 10 years, but especially in the last 4 or 5 years with that phenomenal growth and then a bit of a downward turn. But congratulations to you and the team on what you've achieved.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Troy.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.